The bitter Wyoming winter of 1887 had descended upon the Iron Ridge Ranch with a vengeance. Snow lay thick and heavy across the valley, turning the world into a vast, silent expanse of white. Julian Blackwood stood at the frosted window of the main house, watching his breath plume against the glass. The ranch, a sprawling empire of 20,000 cattle and 500 horses, usually hummed with activity. But today, under the oppressive weight of the gray sky, it felt like a fortress under siege. Julian was 28, a man carved from the same rugged granite as the mountains that bordered their land. He turned as the heavy oak door creaked open. Old Gus, the ranch foreman who had taught Julian to ride before he could walk, stepped in, stomping snow from his boots. "Your father is waiting, Julian," Gus said, his voice grave. "Says it can't wait." Julian nodded, a knot tightening in his stomach. When Colonel Thaddeus Blackwood summoned you, it was never for a pleasant chat. He walked down the drafty hallway to the study, the heart of the Iron Ridge operation. The walls were lined with the mounted heads of elk and bison, their glass eyes staring blankly. Thaddeus stood by the fireplace, the flames casting long, dancing shadows across his weathered face. At 62, the colonel was a man who ruled his domain with an iron fist. He didn't look up as Julian entered. "Sit," Thaddeus commanded. Julian took the leather chair opposite the desk. Gus said it was urgent. "It isn't." Thaddeus picked up a piece of heavy parchment. "The world is changing, son. The handshake deals that built this territory are dying. The railroad is expanding, and with it come banks, lawyers, and politicians. We need protection. We need alliances. We have 20,000 head of cattle, father. We are the alliance," Julian argued. "We are one bad winter away from ruin," Thaddeus snapped. "I've made arrangements. 3 families are arriving from Denver and Cheyenne within the week. The Thorns, the Hayes, and the Vanderbilts. They all have daughters. They all have influence." Julian felt the blood drain from his face. "You invited them here? In the middle of winter? They will brave the snow for the Blackwood name," Thaddeus said coldly. "You will choose one. You will court her. And you will be married by the new year. And if I refuse, then you can pack your saddlebags. You'll leave Iron Ridge with nothing. No inheritance, no land, no legacy." Thaddeus leaned forward, his eyes hard as flint. "And don't think I don't know where you spend your evenings. That stable girl, the Chinese orphan." Julian's hands clenched into fists. "Her name is Mai. She is a refugee with nothing to her name but the rags on her back," Thaddeus spat. "She works hard, I'll grant her that. Best hand with a sick horse I've ever seen. But she is not wife material for a Blackwood. You cannot build a dynasty on sentiment, boy. The banks don't accept love as collateral." Julian stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I need time. You have until they arrive. Prepare yourself." Julian stormed out of the house, grabbing his heavy sheepskin coat. He didn't head for the bunkhouse or the open range. He walked straight into the biting wind, trudging through knee-deep drifts toward the massive stables. The structure was warmer than the house, filled with the scent of hay, leather, and warm animal bodies. He found her in the foaling stall, kneeling in the straw next to a mare that had been colicky. Mai moved with a fluid grace that seemed out of place in the rough frontier. She wore a tattered, grayish-white traditional cheongsam, the silk worn thin and patched in places, laid beneath a rough wool shawl to ward off the chill. It was the only thing she had left from a life she barely remembered, a life before her parents died working the railroad, leaving her alone in a foreign land. She looked up as Julian entered, her dark eyes wide and knowing. "He told you," she stated softly. "It wasn't a question." "He did," Julian replied, the anger draining out of him, replaced by a profound weariness. "They arrive in a few days." Mai turned back to the horse, her hands gentle on the animal's flank. "The ranch needs the alliances, Julian. Your father is a hard man, but he is not wrong about the danger. The smaller ranches are failing. I don't care about the ranch. I care about you, Julian said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He stepped into the stall, the urge to touch her overwhelming, but he held back. You are a Blackwood, Mai said, standing up. She brushed the straw from her faded cheongsam. And I am just Mai. I muck stalls. I sleep in the tack room. We exist in different worlds. We live on the same land, Julian insisted. You know horses better than any man on this payroll. You know this land. You belong here. As a servant, she corrected him gently. Go, Julian. Do your duty. If you refuse him, you lose everything. And she paused, looking away. I would likely be sent away. And I have nowhere else to go in this snow. The reality of her words hit him like a physical blow. If he defied his father now, without a plan, Thaddeus would likely fire Mai just to spite him. He had to be smart. He had to bide his time. I haven't chosen anyone yet, Julian said firmly. And I won't let him drive you away. The first carriage arrived 2 days later, struggling through the fresh snow. It carried Victoria Thorne and her father, a banking mogul from Denver. Victoria was undeniably beautiful, with pale blonde hair and eyes like ice, wrapped in expensive furs that cost more than a year's wages for a ranch hand. Next came Eleanor Hayes, a sensible woman whose family controlled the water rights to the south. She seemed less interested in Julian and more interested in the livestock. Finally, the Vanderbilt carriage arrived, bringing young Sophia, a girl who looked terrified of the open sky. The dinner that evening was an exercise in torture. The dining room blazed with candlelight, the silver polished to a mirror shine. Thaddeus presided over the table like a king holding court. Mr. Blackwood, Victoria Thorne purred, leaning toward Julian. Father tells me you run nearly 25,000 head. It must be quite the feeling, possessing all this power. It's a lot of work, Miss Thorne, Julian said shortly. The cattle don't care about power. They care about feed and protection from the wolves. How rustic, she laughed, a sound that grated on Julian's nerves. But surely, with the right capital, you could hire more men to do the dirty work. A rancher who doesn't work his own land isn't a rancher, Julian replied. He's just a landlord. Across the table, Eleanor Hayes nodded in agreement, though she remained silent. Thaddeus shot Julian a warning look. My son is modest, Thaddeus interjected smoothly. He manages the entire operation. He is building an empire. As the courses were served, Julian's mind drifted to the stables. He knew Mai was out there in the cold, likely breaking ice on the water troughs. The contrast between the gluttony at the table and Mai's tattered silk dress made him lose his appetite. The next morning, Thaddeus insisted on a tour of the ranch, despite the freezing temperatures. The guests were bundled in furs and loaded into sleighs. Julian rode alongside on his black stallion, Midnight. They stopped at the main barn to inspect the prize breeding stock. Thaddeus wanted to show off a new thoroughbred stallion. As the group entered the warm stable, they found Mai leading the massive horse out of his stall. She looked small next to the beast, her breath misting in the air. Her grey-white cheongsam peeked out from under her coat, ragged at the hem. Careful, Mai warned softly, seeing the crowd. He is spirited today. Victoria Thorne wrinkled her nose. Who is this? Does she not speak English properly? She speaks fine, Julian snapped, dismounting. Miss Mai is the head of our horse operation, in practice if not in title. Victoria laughed. A woman? An ale foreigner? Surely you jest, Mr. Blackwood. She looks like a beggar. She stepped closer to Mai, looking her up and down with disdain. That dress. It looks like it belongs in a rag pile. Mai's face remained impassive, a mask of calm she had perfected over years of hardship. It keeps the cold out, miss, she said simply. It's an eyesore, Victoria sneered. Thaddeus, surely you can afford proper staff. She knows her place, Thaddeus said dismissively. Move the horse, girl. The guests want to see his confirmation. My turned the horse, her movements precise. But as she did, the stallion spooked at the flutter of Victoria's fur coat. He reared up. Victoria shrieked and stumbled back. In a split second, my moved, not away from the danger, but toward it. She grabbed the lead rope with both hands, making a sharp, calming sound. She utilized her body weight, leveraging the animal down with a skill that left the onlookers stunned. The horse settled, huffing nervously. My stroked his neck, whispering to him. "Dangerous beast!" Victoria cried, clutching her pearls. "It should be put down. And that girl is incompetent." "That girl just saved you from being trampled," Eleanor Hayes spoke up, her voice cutting through the hysteria. Eleanor stepped forward, ignoring the mud on her boots. She looked at Mai with genuine respect. "That was incredible horsemanship. Where did you learn that?" "The horses teach you, if you listen," Mai replied quietly. Julian stepped between Victoria and Mai. "Are you all right?" he asked Mai, ignoring his father's glare. "I am fine, Julian," she said, slipping up and using his first name before correcting herself. "Mr. Blackwood." Victoria caught the slip. Her eyes narrowed. "Julian?" "Mai, quite familiar with the help, aren't we?" Thaddeus stepped in, his face red with suppressed rage. "Enough. The tour is over. Back to the house." As the sleighs pulled away, Julian lingered. "I'm sorry," he told Mai. "Don't be," she said, turning back to the stall. "They are just people. The snow treats us all the same." That night, Julian made a decision. He couldn't marry Victoria Thorne. He couldn't marry any of them. But he couldn't let the ranch fail either. He remembered a rumor he'd heard in town weeks ago, something about a survey team from the Union Pacific looking for a new pass through the mountains to avoid the heavy drifts of the southern route. He found old Gus in the bunkhouse. "Gus, I need you to ride to Cheyenne. Tonight." "In this blizzard?" "You're mad," Gus grunted. "It's for the ranch. And it's for me." Julian quickly wrote a letter. "Find the railway commissioner. Tell him the Iron Ridge Pass is clear. Tell him we're willing to negotiate rights of way, but only if they sign immediately." Gus looked at the letter, then at Julian. "This is about the girl, ain't it?" "It's about the future, Gus." Gus nodded slowly. "I'll saddle up." The next 3 days were a blur of forced socialization. Julian played the part of the suitor, but his heart was agonizingly absent. He saw Mai only in passing, her eyes downcast, the distance between them growing with every hour. On the 4th day, the snow stopped, leaving the world glittering under a pale sun. Thaddeus summoned Julian and the 3 families to the study. It was time for the decision. "Ladies, gentlemen," Thaddeus began, pouring brandy. "My son has spent the week getting to know your charming daughters. We are ready to announce an alliance that will shape the future of Wyoming." Victoria Thorne sat smugly, smoothing her dress. She was the obvious choice financially. Eleanor Hayes looked bored. The Vanderbilts looked hopeful. "Julian," Thaddeus said. "Speak." Julian walked to the center of the room. He looked at his father, then at the expectant faces. "I want to thank you all for coming. You have fine families. But I cannot marry any of your daughters." The room exploded in gasps. Thaddeus dropped his glass, the crystal shattering. "What did you say?" "I said no," Julian repeated calmly. "You ungrateful wretch!" Mr. Thorne shouted. "We traveled through a blizzard for this insult." "I offer no insult, only honesty," Julian said. "Marriage should be built on more than bank accounts." "Get out," Thaddeus roared, his voice shaking the walls. "Get out of my house. You are no son of mine. You chose the beggar? Then go live with her in the filth." "I intend to," Julian said. Suddenly, the heavy doors opened. Old Gus stood there, looking exhausted, frosted with ice, but grinning. He walked straight to Julian and handed him a sealed legal document. "What is this?" Thaddeus demanded. Julian broke the seal. This, he said, scanning the paper, is a contract with the Union Pacific Railroad. Gus rode to Cheyenne and back. They've been looking for a winter route. Our northern pass is the only one stable enough. They are paying us a fortune for the right-of-way, father. Enough to secure the ranch for the next 50 years without a single loan from a Denver bank. Silence fell over the room. Mr. Thorne's face went purple. You went behind our backs. I secured my own future, Julian said. He handed the paper to his father. Read it. Thaddeus read the figures. His eyes widened. It was more money than all 3 dowries combined. The ranch is safe, Julian said. We don't need their money. And I don't need their permission. Julian turned to the families. My foreman will escort you back to town when you are ready. Safe travels. As the outraged guests stormed out to pack their bags, Thaddeus sank into his chair. He looked at the contract, then at his son. You risked everything on a gamble. I learned from you, Julian said. But I'm not you. I won't sell my happiness. And the girl? Thaddeus asked quietly. I'm going to ask her to marry me. Today. Thaddeus looked out the window at the snow-covered peaks. She has no standing. Society will shun us. Let them, Julian said. We have the railroad. We have the land. And we have each other. Thaddeus was silent for a long time. Finally, he poured a fresh glass of brandy. She handled that stallion well, he grunted. Better than you could have. It was the closest thing to a blessing Julian would get. Julian ran to the stables. He found Mai packing a small satchel in the tack room. She had heard the shouting from the main house. I'm leaving, she said, fighting back tears. I won't be the cause of your ruin. Put the bag down, Mai, Julian said, breathless. I cannot stay, Julian. I am a reminder of everything you shouldn't want. You are everything I need, he said, taking her hands. Her fingers were rough and cold, but he held them tight. The guests are leaving. I made a deal with the railroad. The ranch is safe. And I told my father I'm choosing you. Mai stared at him, disbelief warring with hope. You chose. The orphan in rags. I chose the woman who holds this ranch together. The woman who wears her history with dignity, even when it's tattered. He gently touched the collar of her grayish-white cheongsam. I love you, Mai. Tears spilled over her cheeks. I have nothing to give you, Julian. No dowry. No name. You give me peace, he whispered. And that is worth more than gold. The wedding took place 2 weeks later, on Christmas Eve. It was snowing again, large soft flakes that coated the world in silence. There were no society guests, no bankers or politicians. The chapel was filled with ranch hands, Gus standing as the best man. Thaddeus stood at the front. He looked stiff, uncomfortable, but he was there. When Mai walked down the aisle, she wasn't wearing a silk gown from Paris. She wore a dress she had made herself, a fusion of Western lace and the style of her homeland, white as the snow outside. She held her head high, radiant and strong. As they exchanged vows, the wind howled outside, but inside, it was warm. When the ceremony ended, Thaddeus approached them. He looked at Mai, really looked at her, for the first time. Welcome to Iron Ridge, he said gruffly. He extended a hand. Mai took it, her grip firm. Thank you, Thaddeus, she said. That evening, as the celebration continued in the bunkhouse with fiddles and laughter, Julian and Mai stepped out onto the porch. The snow had stopped, and the moon illuminated the vast, white valley. Are you afraid? Mai asked, leaning into him. People will talk. Let them talk, Julian smiled, wrapping his coat around her. They'll say the rancher's son married a queen in rags. And what will you say? I'll say I married the only woman who could tame the winter. They stood together, watching the moonlight glitter on the snow, ready to face the future. It would be hard work. There would be judgment and whispers in town. But as Julian looked at his wife, standing proud in the face of the elements, he knew he had made the only choice that mattered. The cold could not touch them now. The story of Julian and Mai reminds us that the true value of a person is never found in their bank account, their lineage, or the clothes they wear. While society often judges based on surface-level appearances, like a tattered cheongsam or a lack of family name, true nobility is found in character, resilience, and the willingness to work hard for what you love. Julian demonstrated immense courage by rejecting the easy path of a convenient marriage, choosing instead to honor his heart and recognize the worth of a woman who had nothing but her integrity to offer. In doing so, he proved that love, when combined with perseverance and a little bit of ingenuity, can overcome even the harshest winters and the sternest disapproval. It teaches us that we must be brave enough to write our own stories, rather than letting others dictate our chapters. What did you think of Julian's decision to risk his inheritance for Mai? Do you think Thaddeus was right to worry about the ranch's future, or was he too blinded by tradition? We would love to hear your thoughts on this Wild West romance in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of love conquering the odds, please like the video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales from the frontier. Thank you for watching.